The Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery is the largest American cemetery in all of Europe. Here on 130 acres lie the remains of over 14,000 American soldiers of the Great War. Though in life they were separated by rank and by race, here they lay side by side. You'll find a captain next to an orderly, a white pilot award the Medal of Honor next to an African American who wanted to fight but was instead given manual labor tasks. Most of these graves belong to men who fought and died in the Meuse-Argonne offensive in the fall of 1918. Most of them died in the span of just a few weeks. But also buried here are some civilians, including 7 women who were nurses or secretaries, 3 children, and 3 chaplains. There are 22 sets of brothers buried here, though not side by side. And there are 9 Medal of Honor recipients. Of the over 14,000 headstones, nearly all are Latin crosses, though there are 268 Stars of David. 486 graves are marked unknown, and there are 954 names on the walls of the missing in the chapel. The headstones are simple: a name, a rank, regiment, and the date of death. You'll see the same divisions over and over again. They were mainly geographic in origin. The 91st Division was called the Wild West Division from California and the Western states. The 77th was the Statue of Liberty Division from New York. There were exceptions. The 82nd Division was known as the All-American Division because it was one of the ones that was formed from soldiers all across the country. And the 93rd Division was a segregated black division. But they were all Americans, and they are all heroes. Today I'd like to take the time to share just a few of their stories. Victor Emmanuel Chapman was born in New York City in 1890, but he came to France with his father after his mother died when he was a child. He returned to America as a teenager, where he attended school, and he eventually graduated from Harvard. He was again living here in France when the Great War began, and within weeks he had enlisted in the French Foreign Legion. Not a lot of people know that there were Americans fighting on the ground with the French Foreign Legion in the early days of the war. It was there on the front lines that he became friends with some fellow Americans who also served in the Foreign Legion. After one of their friends was killed, Victor left the Legion and decided to attend flight school, and he was quickly certified as one of the very first American fighter pilots. He flew several missions with the French Air Forces and was eventually promoted to the rank of sergeant, as you see here on his marker. Soon, another opportunity came along when he was given the chance to become one of the very first members of N-124, which is known as the Lafayette Escadrille, as you can see right here. The Lafayette Escadrille was a French squadron that was made up of American volunteer pilots and was named in honor of the Marquis de Lafayette, who was a French nobleman who served as an American general during the Revolutionary War. And so it was a way of Americans who served in the French army to return the favor. On June 17th of 1916, he was flying over the Verdun sector when he was attacked by 4 German airplanes. During the engagement, Chapman suffered a head wound, most likely from an attack by the German pilot named Walter Hundorf. Chapman was able to land his airplane safely, with Hundorf getting his 5th victory as a result, making him an ace. Chapman returned to the air within days, despite the fact that his bandaged head was obvious to everyone, and he was still suffering from that wound. On June 23rd, he was attacked north of Douaumont by German flying ace Lieutenant Kurt Wittgens, with Wittgens flying a Halberstadt D2 that day against Chapman's Nieuport 11. Wittgens soon gained the upper hand. Chapman's plane was hit and crashed into the ground at full speed behind German lines. Needless to say, he was killed instantly and is officially classified as the very first American pilot to ever be killed in action. There were no medals of honor awarded to black soldiers for heroism during World War I. This was finally corrected in 1991 when President George Bush presented a posthumous award to the Sisters of South Carolina's Freddie Stowers. His citation reads as follows: Corporal Stowers, a native of Anderson County, South Carolina, distinguished himself by exceptional heroism on 28 September 1918 while serving as a squad leader in Company C, 371st Infantry Regiment, 93rd Infantry Division. His company was the lead company during the attack on Hill 188, Champagne-Marne sector, France, during World War I. A few minutes after the attack began, the enemy ceased firing and began climbing up onto the parapets of the trenches, holding up their arms as if wishing to surrender. The enemy's actions caused the American forces to cease fire and to come out into the open. As the company started forward, and when within about 100 meters of the trench line, the enemy jumped back into their trenches and greeted Corporal Stowers' company with interlocking bands of machine gun fire and mortar fire, causing well over 50% casualties. Faced with incredible enemy resistance, Corporal Stowers took charge, setting such a courageous example of personal bravery and leadership that he inspired his men to follow him in the attack. With extraordinary heroism and complete disregard of personal danger under devastating fire, he crawled forward, leading his squad toward an enemy machine gun nest, which was causing heavy casualties to his company. After fierce fighting, the machine gun position was destroyed, and the enemy soldiers were killed. Displaying great courage and intrepidity, Corporal Stowers continued to press the attack against a determined enemy. While crawling forward and urging his men to continue the attack on a second trench line, he was gravely wounded by machine gun fire. Although Corporal Stowers was mortally wounded, he pressed forward, urging on the members of his squad until he died. Inspired by the heroism and display of bravery of Corporal Stowers, his company continued the attack against incredible odds, contributing to the capture of Hill 188 and causing heavy enemy casualties. Corporal Stowers' conspicuous gallantry, extraordinary heroism, and supreme devotion to his men were well above and beyond the call of duty and follow the finest traditions of military service and reflect the utmost credit on him and the United States Army. And it's just one more example of the spirit of human beings to rise above and beyond. And Corporal Stowers is one of those people who stands as a hero among heroes in this place. You know, walking through the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery, it reminds me of the melting pot that is America. You see Italian names, you see French names, you see German names. I've seen several, but this happened to be the one that I'm standing next to. Hermann Mueller. Doesn't get more German than a name like that, and yet here he is in France fighting against his family's homeland, fighting for America, fighting for France, fighting against Germany. Here in a row of nurses and civilians and infants in Section F is Marion Crandall, who was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She went to school in her hometown and in Omaha, Nebraska before studying overseas at Sorbonne University here in France. Afterwards, she taught French in St. Catherine's School in Davenport, Iowa. When the U.S. entered the Great War, Marion decided to lend her language skills to the cause, and she resigned from her teaching post. She joined the United States Christian Commission of the YMCA, and she's actually in a row of YMCA graves here. She was 45 years old when she joined up. After a few weeks of training, Marion departed for the front to teach French to Allied soldiers. When she arrived in France on February 15th of 1918, Marion worked at a YMCA canteen in Saint-Ménehould, in what was known as Le Foyer du Soldat, which is roughly translated as the soldier's fireside. It was a place that soldiers could rest. On March 27, 1918, she was working near the front line at Saint-Ménehould when German artillery began bombarding the town. A shell destroyed the building where she had sought refuge. She died from her injuries to her arm and to her neck a short time later. That made her the first American woman to be killed in active service in the First World War. Marion Crandall was temporarily buried in a hospital cemetery before being brought here after the war, and that's probably why all of these folks are nearby to each other. They probably came from the same hospital cemetery. In a letter, the director of the canteen wrote about Marion Crandall's burial service. This is what was said, quote, "The American director of the foyer at Le Grand Abois arranged for a military carriage to come for her. A chaplain of the Army Corps held a service in the little hut as a chapel draped in black. There was also there the coffin of a soldier who had been killed. Thus, Miss Crandall, who came to France to serve soldiers, was treated as a soldier, with the same honors as for those who fell fighting. A large flag with 3 colors covered her bier, and some friends had brought a crown and flowers. The same carriage and horses which are used for the soldiers took her body to the military cemetery. This was indeed her place, beside 6,000 tombs of soldiers who died for their country. Miss Crandall had also died for France, pour la France, mort pour la France, as they say it. The head doctor tells me that this is the first woman buried in this vast cemetery, the very sight of which moves the heart." And then there's a quote at the end of that writing. It says, "The discourse of the chaplain was punctuated by the cannon. The speaker recalled that the evening before the catastrophe, a Catholic chaplain visiting the foyer asked Marion Crandall if she were not afraid. Marion replied, 'Oh no, I pray. And after that, I have no more fear.'" Eddie Grant was born in Franklin, Massachusetts in 1883. He earned a law degree at Harvard in 1909, where he played baseball and received the nickname Harvard Eddie. Eddie's best remembered for his baseball career. After a 3-hit debut with the Cleveland Naps of the American League, who went on to be the Indians and now the Guardians, the team I root for, he went on to the minor leagues. He reappeared in the majors in the 1907 with the Phillies and took over as leadoff batter in 1908, leading the National League in at-bats in both 1908 and 1909. Eddie Grant became a fine fielding third baseman, fast on the bases and dependable in the clutch. In 1915, after 2.5 seasons with the New York Giants, where he was a favorite of John McGraw, he retired so he could practice law in New York City. When war was declared on Germany, Eddie joined the 307th Infantry of the 77th Liberty Division. He entered the service from New York as a captain. On October 5th, 1918, he was leading a mission in the Argonne forest as part of a number of missions to try and rescue and break through to the Lost Battalion. And it was during one of those missions that he was killed by German shellfire. Eddie Grant became the first of 3 Major League Baseball players who were killed in the First World War. A monument to his memory was placed in center field in the Polo Grounds in New York. Each Memorial Day, there was a wreath-laying ceremony at his plaque. Erwin Bleckley was one of 2 men who were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor while assisting the Lost Battalion in October of 1918. His Medal of Honor citation reads as follows, quote, "Second Lieutenant Bleckley, with his pilot, First Lieutenant Harold E. Goetler, Air Service, left the aerodrome late in the afternoon on their second trip to drop supplies to a battalion of the 77th Division, which had been cut off by the enemy in the Argonne forest. Having been subjected on the first trip to violent fire from the enemy, they attempted on the second trip to come still lower in order to get the packages even more precisely on the designated spot. In the course of his mission, the plane was brought down by enemy rifle and machine gun fire from the ground. This resulted in fatal wounds to Second Lieutenant Bleckley, who died before he could be taken to a hospital. In attempting and performing this mission, Second Lieutenant Bleckley showed the highest possible contempt of personal danger, devotion to duty, courage, and valor.